Hold at 925-1191.
Oh, Randy, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. It's a little bit. It's about 5:32, so maybe we'll just go ahead and get started. And hi, Carr. Haven't seen you for years, and welcome joining us. So anyway, I'm Cindy Hubin. I'm the Community Development Director, and Ellen Sassano, our Long Range Planning Senior Planner, is here with us, along with Renee Shiles, who is our administrative or our permit. What are you? Senior Permit Administrator.
Yep.
Bonnie's here helping us tonight with all of our video and recording. So I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. And thanks so much for being here. We tonight just wanted to say that this is our fourth meeting that we've had about the Castle Creek and east of Aspen planning areas. And so Ellen's going to bring up a couple slides for us to just show us, you know, what's going on with this process. So east of Aspen, Independence Pass, and Castle Creek, we have, like I've said, we've had several meetings already, but we wanted you to know that we also have a website up, and that website, you can access that and find all the comments that anyone sends us in writing.
Yeah, give me a second here, Cindy. I can pull that up. I'm just trying to move this.
Great. Yeah, we want to give you the website connection and also tell you what's on the website if you don't already know. But I think most people on this call do know that.
Oh, well, can you see my screen?
I can.
Can everybody see my screen? I'm trying to, I can't reach.
There you go.
That's not going to work, is it?
Well, there, we've seen now the link, Elle.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's the link, and on the website we have the draft of the master plans and the existing conditions reports, and we're going to be putting up all the comments that we receive. And if you've missed a meeting, you can always go back to the recordings for the past meetings if there's something that you really want to check in on. So far, we really want to thank everyone for the comments that we have received. Some have been extensive and some have been detailed, and others have just been maybe one comment here or there on specific areas of the planning areas. But they're all going to be posted on the website if they're not already, and we'll go from there. So thank you. The main things that tonight, we are going to consolidate all of those comments and determine how we can put those into the plan. And then tonight we had two things that we really wanted to talk about with this group, and that was the boundaries of the Castle Creek plan and potentially carving off the lower portion of the Castle Creek planning area and turning that into a separate plan. The reason for that is I don't know if you remember, but several years ago, Ellen, that is very big on the screen, on my screen. I don't know if you want to take it down, but several years ago, Castle and Maroon Creek were one planning area. And then they separated into the Maroon Creek planning area and the Castle Creek planning area. So with that, some of the boundaries got a little wonky. And also with that, when we first started these boundary areas for the plans and caucus groups, the issue was that we had not yet even finalized, I don't think, the Aspen Area Community Plan, or somehow the Aspen Area Community Plan boundaries then came into Castle Creek and into Maroon Creek. So actually much of the planning area in the lower portions of Castle Creek and Maroon Creek are within the Aspen area community plan and within the urban growth boundary. So with all that, we've gotten a little bit of feedback from people who live in lower Castle Creek and who have said that they believe that the issues are different enough so that we may want to separate out the planning area and just focus on lower Castle Creek and Maroon Creek and not bring upper Castle Creek into that and vice versa. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight. Joe Wells, who's here with us tonight, just submitted this afternoon a letter outlining very specifically the planning area and the issues with the planning area, and makes the recommendation. And I don't know, Joe, if that's just from you or from the Castle Creek Caucus, but the recommendation is that we separate lower Castle Creek from upper Castle Creek. And I'll tell you where the boundaries are of the Aspen Area Community Plan. And I think we could work to sync up those boundaries if we worked on it. But the boundaries, basically the way I think about the Aspen Area Community Plan boundaries is to both first bridges. To the first bridge on Maroon Creek and to where the water line comes down on Castle Creek from the water plant, the city water plant, crosses near Castle Ridge and comes down under the road and then goes very close to where the music school is. So that's where those lines kind of are today. And Ellen, I think you have some maps, but Joe, if you want to hop in and talk any more about your thoughts on that. And then I'm sorry to say Cliff Weiss, who also suggested, he lives in, what's it called, Ridge?
Twin Ridge.
Twin Ridge. He lives in Twin Ridge. He suggested the same thing, that maybe we take a more focused look at the lower part of the valley and bring that into a separate plan. And unfortunately, Cliff couldn't make it with us tonight.
Right.
Can I back up just a little bit?
Sure.
As you know, Marcella's group kind of precipitated getting the Castle Creek Caucus back up and running by spinning off the Maroon Creek side. When she did that, they did not include any of the unincorporated areas in the Highlands base area. I'm assuming there are some, although I'm not terribly familiar with that side. So essentially we ended up and still have as a current boundary for the Castle Creek Caucus, everything that was originally within the caucus minus Marcella's group, the piece they wanted to include in their caucus, which is fairly far up valley in the Maroon Creek, on the Maroon Creek side. At the time we were gearing up to try to get started again as the Castle Creek Caucus, I was concerned that we needed to have areas like Meadowwood and Twin Ridge in our boundary just because of the representation. I was concerned that if they weren't in, we wouldn't have enough people showing up for meetings and that sort of thing. As it turns out, that couldn't be further from the truth. There was actually some resistance from Meadowwood by certain parties, active parties in the HOA, to not be included in the caucus. And my advice to them at the time was, well, don't give me your email address and, you know, you won't receive all these mailings. So there, as it turns out, we've had actually very little participation from the area, the unincorporated areas inside the urban growth boundary. That includes Meadowood, Twin Ridge, and I also had included the South 7th Street neighborhood, because those areas are also unincorporated, but they are within the boundary of the UGB. So the place I've come to is that number one, we get very little participation from those neighborhoods anyway, and they're subject to a different master plan. They're subject to zone districts that we don't have in the rural area. And I just feel like they shouldn't be included in our rural area caucus. So that's my 2 cents.
Thanks. I think that was a lot of the rationale that that we were looking at as well, but we really want to chat, and I'm really happy to see that Steve and Suzanne are here, who live in Meadowood, and maybe they have some comments, and then Mac, you know, with the Highlands being on the Maroon Creek side, which got captured in all of the lower Castle Creek side when it was split from Maroon Creek, which is a little bit of a hodgepodge. And we might have to sit down with a map, you know, and really go over that, because Ellen does have some maps here that I'm not sure if we're able to bring them up, but she has some maps, but they're a little bit hard to see all the detail when you're here. But Joe, I know you spilled over these earlier, you know, and looked at that. But you might want to also bring up for Mac the Maroon Creek side, which shows where Highlands is today. And then I see that Marcella, you got on the call. Welcome. And I'm sure you know the exact boundary of your caucus area as well. So all of this may be a thought that we, you know, some of us get together and more readily spill over the maps and take a look. But I think that Joe's justification is good for the lower part of these valleys being within the Aspen Area Community Plan area, and also much of which is in the urban growth boundary, that we would create a separate plan that is much like the west of Maroon Creek plan. When we were working with the city on the Aspen Area Community Plan, we fully intended that we would come back and do more of a land use plan for all of the area within the Aspen Area Community Plan. But the city and the county did not do that jointly. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way, where we created a separate west of Maroon Creek plan for the county. And the city doesn't really have the same type of master plan planning that we do. So there's no follow-up on more of the traditional, you know, master plans for the city part of the urban growth boundary area. So we would recommend that we would create a master plan for the lower parts of Castle and Maroon, and hopefully entice the city to do that jointly with us at this point, because it's such a patchwork of ownership of city, county. The hospital is in the city, you know, Castle Ridge is in the county, Twin Ridge is in the county, across the way, Marolt is in the city. So we've got just a hodgepodge. Suzanne?
Yes, I have a question of Joe and then a couple of comments. Joe, has in the Castle Creek caucus, has there ever been a caucus board?
Well, since we restarted, there has not been.
Okay. Would you, let's pretend that Meadowood is, I live in Meadowood, pretend that Meadowood is cut away. Would you think that well, I think that a caucus board is a way to stay organized and up to date on things. Do you agree that that would help in your area or in the Castle Creek caucus?
Well, unfortunately, it's a question of getting people to volunteer for that service.
Well,
I agree with you. It would, it would be a good idea. For instance, Alice is actually the head of the caucus. I agree when we geared everything up again that I would handle all the communications so that she wouldn't have to deal with that. But she's the legitimate head of the caucus.
Oh, so you do have a caucus board?
I guess to some extent, yes, we did establish that. Of course, we've essentially lost 2 years of public meetings now, thanks to COVID.
Right.
I've tried not to become educated in Zoom. So we've been communicating through an email list for this period when we can't really get together and meet.
Okay, and so why don't I get emails?
Because you haven't submitted your email address to me, so I don't have it. Happy to add you, although we're talking about.
But you don't exist.
cutting you loose. Yeah, the way people have signed up, they find out that there's a caucus and they submit their email address to me and I add it to the mailing list.
I see.
So there's roughly, well, the list keeps dwindling because people sell their properties and ask to be removed. So I think we're probably down to around 70 names on the list.
Oh, well, that's a lot, I think. Gosh. So what would happen, Cindy, if the suggestions even on the maps that I downloaded and printed, it's very hard to see them. So sitting at a table and looking at a map would be very helpful. And I'd love for at least Joe to be sitting there so that I could more closely understand what his reasoning is. But if Meadowood was cut out of the Castle Creek caucus, what caucus would I be in?
Well, I think you could form another caucus if you chose, Lower Castle Creek caucus or something like that. You could form a caucus if you chose to. We don't necessarily need a caucus to do a master plan for the area, but we obviously prefer it. Marcella has her hand up, but Suzanne, that's the way that would work. We would define a boundary and then do a planning process for that boundary, within that boundary.
Well, with your saying, let me just say this one more thing. With your saying that you don't think we need a caucus to do a master plan, my experience on P&Z years ago was, I was on a very proactive P&Z. And so we went out to caucus areas to facilitate their writing their own master plan. And then people have ownership in it and what they are about. And so while I'd hate to see us, I don't want to be left out and I don't want my neighbors to be left out, but I do want to hear Joe's reasoning sometime when we're sitting together looking at a map.
And I know we have two hands up, Mac and Marcella. but I'm going to jump in quickly to respond to Suzanne also. Well, we can talk about whether it makes sense to incorporate the Meadowood area into a caucus, or whether it should exist as a caucus in and of itself. But as Cindy said, in terms of a plan and the ability to contribute to the development of that plan, as you can see on this map, I don't know if you can see my arrow, but here's Meadowood. And the crosshatch around it is the city of municipal boundary for the city of Aspen. And then this pink line, I don't know how well people can see the screen, is the urban growth boundary area for the city of Aspen. And so this Meadowood, being within the urban growth boundary, should in theory be included as part of the Aspen Area Community Plan, which is soon to be in theory updated. So definitely be an opportunity to work with the city on that plan update. So in terms of having Meadowood included within a planning area and a master plan, I don't see that as an issue. If there's a need to form a separate caucus, that's something that we can certainly pursue.
Okay.
If there's a need and a desire.
Okay.
And my thought about that was, there are a lot of these neighborhoods that are not incorporated in the city, but are within the urban growth boundary, including the areas around toward Highlands. And that would make sense to be part of a caucus.
I understand. Yeah. I see your reasoning, and I'd love to talk to you about it sometime when we're not like this.
So I think Marcella had her hand up first, and then Mac. Please follow when Marcella has finished up. Thanks. Marcella?
Yeah, hi there. So Suzanne, you're formerly from the Maroon Creek area. So I would definitely promote your sense that it makes sense for your area to be its own caucus area, or try to have a voice that way. I would be, having been really engaged. You all can hear me, right?
Yes.
Really engaged in the Aspen Area Community Plan in 2012, and not understanding exactly where the politics are going right now in the city of Aspen, and their engagement in actual land use planning. I would encourage you to form your own group and try and get something done for your community. That was very effective for us in the Upper Maroon Creek rural area. We were able to agree on some fairly significant zoning changes, and also basically trying to look at long-term planning in terms of view corridors, et cetera, et cetera. And we were able to come together because we were small.
Mm-hmm.
It was a small group, and it wasn't my group. It wasn't Marcella's group. So it was really productive. So you may want to consider that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mac, did you want to jump in?
Yes, please. Yeah, I just wanted to go along with Cindy's comment and just say that, yeah, I'd love to be a part of a sit down where we take a look at both the Maroon Creek and the Castle Creek planning area maps, as basically they potentially touch up to 3 of our 4 ski areas. So I'd love to go through that and understand specifics, because frankly, the maps I'm looking at and that I've got within my Google Earth files that I uploaded from the county pages are old and need to be updated. And so I need to get a fresh set of eyes on what's been done. So thanks.
And I would just add that I think Joe's concept that these, while Lower Maroon and Lower Castle Creek are on two separate roads, they are both in either surrounded by or adjacent to or in close proximity to the municipal boundary of the city, and within urban growth boundary areas in some cases. And so they share that proximity to the urban area, and it might make sense for them, even though they're both on two separate roads, to come together if there's a desire to form a caucus, as a caucus, by virtue of the fact that they are in either surrounded by or adjacent to the city and within the urban growth boundary area. So it's a different kind of caucus, but I think that might be a good way to go.
Right. While we're on this topic, I noticed, and I could be missing other people, but I noticed Steve Wicks, you're in the chat or whatever we call this thing. Do you have an opinion on Lower Castle Creek becoming its own planning area and potentially its own caucus?
Thank you, Cindy, for asking that. Took me a second to unmute. I'm still pretty new to the caucus process, so it would help me to know what are caucuses supposed to be looking at and achieving. For example, the amount of traffic on Castle Creek Road is, I think, of equal concern to Joe and to me. On the other hand, zoning in the rural area is very different than zoning for us. So I'm going to reserve comment till I have a clear idea of what caucuses are supposed to be discussing and solving.
Great.
I'll since I have the virtual floor for a second, Joe, I'm not sure who gave you the cold shoulder from Meadowood. I've been either the HOA president or vice president for 20 years, and I've always wanted to be in your club.
It's a fairly outspoken lady whose name I can't recall.
Okay, thank you. Well, just know she doesn't speak for all of Meadowood.
That narrows it down for Aspen. Okay. Well, Steve, I'm happy to talk with you anytime about caucuses, but mainly caucuses are recommending bodies to the Board of County Commissioners. And it's meant to be able to be a voice for your area, whatever your concerns might be. It doesn't limit you to just talking about issues that are only in your area. You could obviously work with the Upper Castle Creek Caucus and make joint recommendations to the board if traffic was a joint concern. The caucuses write their own bylaws, and they've just been an interesting, very different, but very democratic way of having localized neighborhood issues being heard by the Board of County Commissioners. We never want to make a caucus so small that it's just an HOA. We want it to be a planning area that really involves, the whole area. And a lot of times in the past, we've always looked at, well, do you access off of the same road? And if you access off the same road, then maybe you have joint concerns. And that's why way back when Castle and Maroon were together, they came together, where the roundabout is now, and they came together and they had joint concerns. But it's really, there are criteria in the county code that talk about being in the same general location and environment. We could go through that, but yeah, it's worth more discussion. And what we're seeking is this group's opinion as to whether or not you want to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission that you actually have a separate lower Castle Maroon, whatever you want to call it, planning area. And from there, you can say you'd like to form your own caucus and go in that direction. Or if you're feeling strongly that you want to continue to be part of the Castle Creek planning area as it's described today.
Cindy, may I ask something?
Yeah.
I think that part of what Steve was asking maybe is what in many caucus areas in which I have worked as a P&Z member before, or as a member, a resident of that caucus, the question is often asked in a caucus meeting of people who say aren't on the caucus board of, is it going to make any difference what I say? You know, if a land use application is referred to the caucus to say, what do you as a caucus think about this? And my answer has always been, and I have always observed it, that it makes a big difference what the caucus says about it, that the county must send land use applications to the caucus board for review, and that what the caucus says and thinks about it carries great weight with the county. And I think that the county is required to send those land use applications, aren't they?
Yes. Well, we're not. Yes, I think we are. Yeah.
Because if you didn't, the caucus would get really mad.
Well, some caucuses don't want us to bother them, but that's okay.
Oh gosh. Oh well.
We do what we're supposed to do from a
Good.
perspective. Yeah.
Good. But because if you do something then that they don't like, you're going to hear from them later.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Well, and the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission do really look to the caucuses for their input when they are reviewing land use applications, when they're considering land use code amendments. They really do consider those caucus input to be significant and important. Matt, do you still have your hand up, or is that a relic?
Sorry about that, Ellen. Yeah.
Nope. Okay.
Well, so maybe from what I'm hearing, we should get everyone together who would like to spill over the map a little bit more together and set a time for that and invite people to come and look at that, and then bring this up again at another meeting. How does that sound?
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, but I don't know who that is.
It's Randy.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, just a quick comment. I agree with Joe's suggestion, and also what Ellen is suggesting. When we think about the caucus and a master plan, it makes way more sense to me to have Castle Creek, the area that is outside the urban growth boundary, which is really a very contiguous area. I mean, we only have 2 zone districts. Well, maybe 3 if you include AF Ski, but we got rural and remote, and we got AR10. And the other areas, what Ellen suggested, I think is also a good idea, that those areas, Lower Castle Creek and Lower Maroon, even though they're served by 2 roads, they've got a lot in common being adjacent to the city boundary and a wider variety of zone districts, and including the South 7th Street area. I think it makes way more sense for us as a caucus to keep the area outside the UGB as part of our caucus area in Castle Creek.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
Yeah.
Could I point out an exception? The
Sure.
music school is also within the UGB. It happens to be surrounded by rural land. For whatever reason, I feel differently about keeping it in the caucus because it is surrounded. It's subject to its own approved plan. But some could suggest that that's inconsistent.
Yeah, given our land use code, that would be inconsistent with the fact that we're trying to keep institutional uses and that sort of thing in the urban growth boundaries. And the code today would recognize it differently, but it's, you know, it's worth discussion. The boundaries, you know, if we're looking at what's going on now, you know, we can make suggestions about the boundaries, and Planning and Zoning Commission can consider all of those suggestions.
And one, yeah, let's look at that. One other, before we get off the discussion of boundary modifications, another area in the Castle Creek caucus that we're going to look at to try to clean up is the, let's see if I can get to the slide, is in the Richmond Ridge area. It's on the eastern boundary of the Castle Creek planning area. I can get to a map here. And basically, let's see if I can get to the map. So can everyone see the Castle Creek planning area? Have I gotten to the right? Okay. So on the right side of the screen is the Richmond Ridge boundary, basically, for the Castle Creek planning area on the east side here. And at the moment, that boundary splits. So here's the Richmond Ridge again. I don't know if you can all see how well you can see my map and my arrow, but it divides the Castle Creek planning area on the left here from the east of Aspen planning area on the right side of the ridge. And right now, the boundary is not a very clean boundary. It doesn't follow the ridge line, the physical ridge line, and it doesn't follow property boundaries. And it goes a little bit back and forth over each side of the ridge. And we'd like to clean up that boundary, basically. And Joe has an opinion on this as well, which is very helpful, and he may want to jump in. But I think what we're looking at is basically trying to follow the ridge line, not road or property, but basically follow the ridge line at the same time trying not to bifurcate any properties. So we may adjust a little bit to follow property lines there, but we don't need to go into great detail right now about what that looks like, but that's another area that really should be cleaned up. So don't know if anybody, Randy or Joe or anybody else has an opinion there.
Well, currently the actual line of the caucus, as we discovered during the Pandora's review, is actually well down below the ridge line on the west side. So my goal from day one has always been to have the Castle Creek caucus extend from ridgeline to ridgeline.
To the extent that we can avoid bifurcating properties, that might make sense, or maybe just literally following the physical ridgeline is the best approach. We need to contemplate a little bit.
So
I agree with that. Oops, sorry.
Sorry.
I like the ridge line. I like the ridge line to ridge. This is Randy. I like the ridge line to ridge line idea. I think that makes sense. Could certainly ask Marcella to weigh in on the bifurcation of properties along the ridge. So I think it would make sense to keep contiguous ownership. So on those, there can't be that many properties that spill on both sides of the ridge, but it would probably make sense to keep them on one unless she felt differently and felt like she wanted to be in the East Aspen as well as the Castle Creek side.
So I'm not sure if can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is Marcella. I think it makes little sense from a planning perspective to actually like divide this around property ownership. What makes sense is actually the area. So, whether it's Richmond Ridge or, Castle Creek or, the east of Aspen area, to me, ideally, and there's probably not a lot of support for this, there would be actually a Richmond Hill planning area. And that would be discrete and would include a lot of public lands and private lands. I think planning around private property holdings makes no sense. But if it has to happen that way, we would like to be part of both caucus areas, both Castle and also east of Aspen. And, it just, again, you're either going to plan for that area discreetly or you're not.
So I see that Glenn has his hand up, and Marcella, I think Cindy wants to, we'll get a little bit of feedback just specifically on the boundary line, but then I think Cindy would like to also talk a little bit more about that concept of how we approach and address that Richmond Ridge area. But so hold that thought. Thanks. Glenn, did you want to weigh in on this topic?
Sure, thanks. I don't think the boundary ought to be based just on the ridge line. To me, it should be more based upon how different land obtains access, because a lot of the land up on the top of the ridge that might be east facing, actually west facing, gets access through it would be east facing, gets access through the west side. So it's over the ridge on the Roaring Fork side, but it's accessed from Little Annie and Midnight Mine Road. So I think it has more of a relationship to Castle Creek than the Roaring Fork Valley side. So anyway, that's my thought on it. I don't think it should be just based on the ridge.
That's a good thought to consider. Matt, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, please. Obviously want to be a part of the conversation when it continues about the ridge line. I appreciated Marcella's comment about potentially kind of creating a separate planning area for Richmond Hill and how that's looked at, as it's a separate area. Obviously would be love to be a part of those conversations. As you go down the ridge line from the sun deck on Aspen Mountain down some of the ski trails on Aspen Mountain, the ridge line, there are trails that are in the Castle Creek drainage that are within the ski area master plan and PUD. And we would prefer to keep the majority, if not all, of Aspen Mountain in one caucus area. I don't think it makes sense to have to go to a different caucus about one improvement over another when you're talking about an area plan, which has its own PUD and which goes in front of the county boards, et cetera. So even though there are some areas on Aspen Mountain that drain into Castle Creek, we'd prefer that stays as part of east of Aspen.
Okay, good to know.
Could I chime in?
Yes. Go ahead, Joe. That's what we're here for.
One issue in that regard is by virtue of the fact that the sun deck is partially on the west side of the ridgeline. The sun deck is visible from areas within the Castle Creek Valley. So I think the residents would want to have some say about what goes on with regard to sun deck expansion, that sort of thing.
Okay, you know, this is a good conversation to have. Oh, Courtney, go ahead. I'll follow up.
Well, I just had a quick question on access. If the ski company is all on East Aspen, would that limit our access and ability through in Castle Creek to things and being able to have a say with access? If that makes any sense.
I'm happy to chime in on that, Courtney, if that's okay, Ellen.
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, just Courtney, the way that the Aspen Mountain Master Plan is written and was approved, there's a traffic management plan associated with Little Annie Road, Midnight Mine Road, with regards to construction access, as well as just day to day. So that whether or not we're within the Castle Creek caucus, or whether or not Aspen Mountain is within Castle Creek caucus, because obviously there's portions of Highlands that are still within it. The access and how that is controlled and how that's managed is something that is baked into the approvals and needs to be addressed whenever we're proposing a new project.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, I think we may have lost Cindy here. Cindy, are you? Yeah, I don't think she's with. I don't think she's. Oh, here she is. Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that this might be a good segue. There might be more conversation about the specifics of exactly where that line should lie, and also how it relates to the ski area. It's a good segue into Cindy, one of the next topic that Cindy wanted to cover. So does that make sense, Cindy?
Yeah, but before we get started with that, I see Marshall has his hand up, and I'm not sure, Courtney, if you your hand up again, but
Oh, let's keep going.
let's see what Marshall wants to say.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense actually to have the ski area, the entire ski area in the Castle Creek caucus, because Summer Road ties directly into Richmond Hill. And I also like the idea of having all the parcels that are accessed off of Castle Creek Road included in the caucus, even though they might be on the east side of the ridge line.
Okay. Good input. Courtney, do you still have your hand raised, or is it just?
Well, I could add one more little quick thing,
Yes, please.
if that's okay. On cultural and historic resources, I was just looking through it, and I think something should be added with the Indigenous history, Indigenous attention, maybe Indigenous parking spaces. It's kind of a concept. I know in Lake Tahoe, they've allowed that for any like within national parks. So since so much of the land in the caucus area is federal, and I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, Courtney. Yeah, Courtney and I had a little bit of a conversation prior to this meeting. So, Courtney, would you be able to stay until 7? Because what I'd like to do is kind of wrap up our discussion on moving forward with a discussion on Richmond Ridge, and then pull in any other topic areas that anybody wants to talk about tonight. And I have yours on the list for sure. So if we could just talk a little bit first about where we had 2 things tonight. We want to talk about the Lower Castle Creek and whether or not that would be split. And the second thing was that the Richmond Ridge discussion, we're getting a lot of comments from folks. We've had written comments, and we've had several phone calls, and we've been working with not only the Forest Service and some of the Upper Castle Creek people that we typically meet with the Upper Castle Creek management team that we have. We meet with them twice a year, and we just had a meeting on the 1st of December. So we've gotten some of their input on Castle Creek. And we've also sent out the 2015 updated, well, we have some updated responses to the 2015 recreation group that met and discussed recreation in not only Upper Castle Creek, but it touched on the Ridge, Richmond Ridge as well. So we've got a lot of interest in that area. We've got mosquito comments in that area. And what Ellen and I thought would be good is if we proposed a Richmond Ridge focus meeting, or several focus meetings, so we could talk about that. And from what I'm hearing tonight, there's the basics. I mean, should we? I have to say I've been sort of shying away from doing a separate Richmond Ridge master plan. And that may not happen right away if that's the decision. But if that's the way the group wants to go, it totally has merit, and we could support that. But we're thinking maybe have a couple special meetings, January the 6th and January the 13th, to just focus on Richmond Ridge for this group. And so how does that sound to everybody? I can see thumbs up with Mac. I can see, anybody else want to let me know what you think, or thumbs up, or how does that look? Thank you, Marshall, thumbs up.
I can't find my thumb.
Is that a thumbs up for you, Suzanne?
Sure.
Joe, I couldn't.
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Randy, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I'm fine talking about that.
Okay, great.
Okay with me, Marcella.
Marcella, thank you. I'm trying to find my list of who's out there because I don't see everybody. Courtney, how about you?
That's fine.
Okay. So we heard from Mark, Joe.
Okay with me.
Glenn, okay, thank you.
Are there any other fingers you can use besides your thumb?
You start.
Not in this public meeting. Card, do you have an opinion on that?
Glenn, that's the beauty of a virtual meeting. You can use any finger you'd like, just as long as.
I saw Car's thumb, I think. Okay. Then I think I've hit everybody. If I haven't, please jump in. Steve Wicks, do you have an opinion on that?
I'm happy to ski Richmond Ridge, but I don't think I need to be involved in that discussion.
Okay, thanks. So I think I hit everybody. So we will set up special meetings just to focus on the Richmond Ridge area and bring all of that data that I listed out to the table on this January 6th and 13th. We're planning the same time format, 5:30 to 7, if that works for folks. And, unfortunately, the way COVID is going and with the instructions from the public health department, I think that it's best to keep the virtual meetings. But what I've offered to a couple people who don't like virtual meetings, I've got one conference room where I can have up to 6 people and still have this type of a setting. So if anybody's interested in meeting together, but maybe not totally, it's sort of a hybrid situation, please let me know, and I'm happy to plug in at the office and make that work. So,
yeah. Can I ask a question? when I don't know how we can go on with the meeting as it had tonight, as it had been planned, because we don't know who we are. And I think that needs to be ironed out first. Meadowood, we need to sit down. I would see it sitting down with Joe and Glenn and Randy or whoever, and you or Ellen, and making a decision about whether Meadowood should be in or out, or Lower Maroon Creek should be in or out, before those of us who may be out double up on meeting time.
Right. And I would recommend, Suzanne, that we have that meeting where we look at the maps and have that discussion before January 6th.
Okay.
So, it gets crazy with the holidays, and I don't know what people's schedules are, but we will really attempt to make that happen. And maybe I'll just take a quick poll right now, because I had written down Suzanne, Joe, Mac, Marcella. I wasn't sure if you wanted to be a part of that conversation. Anybody's welcome, but are you guys around for the holidays?
May I interject, Cindy? As an alternative, we could schedule the January 6th meeting for that discussion about Meadowood if holidays are just going to make it impossible for people to meet between now and then make the January 13th meeting the discussion about Richmond Ridge. It's just an option.
Well, the problem that I see that is that we start to buck up against a joint meeting that we have scheduled to update the board. We're going to get into this. You can see it on the screen. The joint meeting with the Board of County Commissioners and the P&Z to update them on January 25th. But if that's the only way that'll work, we can figure that out. So how about Suzanne, Joe, and Mac, and Marcella? Would you guys want to meet before January 6th, or should we schedule the January 6th meeting as the Lower Castle Creek discussion?
I can do either. And Steve Wicks, I'd like for you to be a part of that, so that I won't be speaking out for Meadowood only. I won't be the only one speaking out for Meadowood.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. And I think you made an excellent point, Suzanne, when you said, let's figure out who we are before we figure out what we're going to be when we grow up.
Yeah.
And so this is Marcella. So I'm, in terms of physical residence, I'm in Upper Maroon Creek. We have our own caucus. We're fully formed. I don't view my property interests that are on top of the mountain as relevant to this conversation. So I don't think I need to be part of it.
Unless you want to hold January 6th as the Richmond Ridge discussion.
No. I think that's a great idea, Cindy. Yes. January 6th, like the more we can talk about the Ridge and try and get some work done there, I think that's really important.
Okay. So let me ask this question. Steve, Mac, Joe, and Suzanne, are you available before January 6th to meet and discuss Lower Castle Creek and Maroon Creek?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm around. We're not going anywhere for the holidays, but would like to do something before the 17th when the family starts coming home. I'd prefer to be out of pocket for the next couple of weeks after that.
Yeah, I would suggest early next week if we can pull it off, Cindy, or before the 17th, which is next. What is that?
Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah.
No, I would. I'd echo that, either before the 17th, the next Friday, or the week of January 3rd, ahead of the meeting on the 6th.
Is everybody that is thinking of being involved, would you be available in the daytime as well as evening?
I would be.
Yeah, all depends on what day, but yes, typically.
Okay, I'm going to go get a calendar for myself.
And I'm looking at my calendar too. This is a small enough group. It's nice we can do this.
Cindy, this is Steve.
Hey, Steve.
If the conversation is going to be about forming a lower valley caucus, should we have some of the key players from that there Maroon Creek caucus at this meeting?
The Maroon Creek Caucus planning area is above where we're talking.
Right. Okay. Right.
Yeah. So Marcella was just stating that she didn't really feel that she needed to be part of, and I can imagine that others don't feel like they do either.
But what I'm saying is, let's say a future caucus might involve, Meadowood, the school area, Five Trees. If that's where we're headed, I feel like we need more representation at the next meeting.
That would be good, to start branching out in that direction, but I think maybe we can get started. And then if the decision is that you would like to split up, then, we'd have to have more public outreach on that to the Maroon Creek side.
Okay.
And also, the Castle Ridge folks and all that, Twin Ridge.
Right.
All that.
Those Twin Ridge folks, they're very politically active.
They are. So, anyway, I'm trying to see the calendar here. Maybe what we'll do is we'll just send out a Google sheet, but I'm definitely pretty packed the first part of the week. Wondering if, we're talking midday, like 11 to 12:30 on the 16th.
That works great for me.
Me too.
I can do that.
Right.
Can you notice? Reminder?
Yes. Ellen, does that work for you? Ellen?
Sorry. Yeah, I'll make it work.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I don't know if I heard, okay, I think I heard from everyone. Thank you. We'll set that time up. And I guess what I'm hearing is you'd like to do that in person. And I think with a smaller number of people, we can make that happen in our ComDev conference room. So we can make that happen. So please come and we'll send you another notice. But the 16th, 11 to 12:30, Ellen will not be able to be there in person, but we can bring her up on the screen in our conference room. So,
and I have a question about that because I prefer to meet in person, and I'm assuming that everybody is fully vaccinated. Are there exceptions?
I'm getting my booster tomorrow morning.
Oh, good. Everybody else vaccinated?
I am, Suzanne, with a booster.
Good.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am.
Good. We're a good group.
Yeah, we are. But we will be required to wear masks.
Yes.
In my conference room.
Yeah.
And we have, according to the way you do the spacing and all that, we are able to have up to 6 people in that room. So I think we'll be okay because Ellen can't be there. So I think we'll make it.
Good.
Yeah.
And as far as logistics go, Joe, do you have any good, since I won't be there, we're going to want to have some good physical maps at the meeting. We'll have to ponder how to make that happen, but because the whole point is to have physical maps to work off of, right?
Molly, we can work with GIS, I bet.
Okay.
Well, Tyler can lend a hand, I'm sure.
Okay. All right. I will work with Tyler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's great, you guys. And boy, this is moving along. So we've created that. I don't know that I'm forgetting anything there, but now what I'd like to do is open up the conversation to the other parts of the master plans. So if there's anybody out there who wants to speak to another portion of the master plan, or portions of the master plan, let's discuss that. I know, Courtney, I cut you off, so I'd like to circle back with you on the 1.6, chapter 1.6, I think it is, with the cultural chapter for the master plan. And then I know, Marshall, you sent in a comment earlier about being concerned about forest health and probably fire issues. So I know those are two more things that people want to get on the topics tonight. Are there any other things that we should make time for that we haven't discussed tonight?
I suggested the addition of a few more maps
Oh, okay.
in my letter. And by the way, it is my letter. It's not a caucus letter.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Joe. I did look at your letter, and any comments that we've received to date, I haven't posted all of them yet. I will post them. Anyone can review them, but we will try to incorporate all of the comments, or at least look at them and incorporate them to the extent that it makes sense in the draft plan or the existing conditions report, depending on what the comments relate to. But we haven't lost them. If we haven't talked about them tonight, it doesn't mean we haven't reviewed your comments to date. And we really appreciate all of the comments received on various topics, including forest health. And yeah, so I'll leave it at that and I want to leave time for you all, including Courtney, to weigh in.
Okay. So Mac and Marshall, you both have your hands up.
Is it okay if I go?
Yep.
All right. We haven't formally commented on the Castle Creek plan yet, but after I'm sure our comments will be dictated based on some of the conversations revolving around the boundaries. So we'll just expect that you'll see something from us just post that meeting on the 16th, Cindy.
Okay.
And then and we've kind of broached the subject, and I'm sure we'll go deeper on page 22, where it was talking about Richmond Hill. Is the intention in this document to have it describes the process that it went through 20 plus years ago during the management plan and the 3 phases and that discussion. Is there a goal, I guess, to be placed by the group to come up with some sort of a recommendation through this process? Or is that separate, I guess? How do you see it?
Are you referring to the Richmond Ridge management plan?
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Good question. I think we ought to bring that up on the 6th and 13th and talk about that, because that's a plan that came out of, the master plan, if you will, to get more in depth on the recreational uses and the management of those uses. And I've always felt like it was a great tool, and we might want to reinvigorate that tool again as maybe a portion of the master plans, the Castle Creek and the East of Aspen plan as it sits today would both have action items that would say, update the Richmond Ridge management plan. That's kind of the way I was envisioning that. But tonight I've heard so much across the board of maybe we need our own Richmond Ridge master plan. And if that's the case, or have the Richmond Ridge have its own planning area, if that's the case, then we could incorporate a lot more into that plan.
Hey, Cindy, this is Marcella. So just to interject there, like I would hate to have this process held up by, separate master planning areas, God forbid. Though I do think it makes a whole lot of sense. The one thing I would add is that, definitely you all need to update your existing conditions because whatever you want to call it, upzoning, whatever, you have Pandora that just happened, right, on the ridge. So that's going to have an impact. It's going to change a lot of the circulation on the ridge, et cetera, et cetera. So that should be incorporated, really part of the discussion about how the ridge works, how the road intersections work, et cetera, and whether that's a separate plan or it's part of a management plan. Again, I don't think it's beneficial to anybody to defer that discussion.
No, I think, there's just pros and cons on whether or not we create a whole nother sub area plan or whatever we want to call it. And there's so much to talk about with that. And I too do not want to hold up this master plan from being updated and adopted. Could be that they're just action items in the plan to then create the sub-area plan or whatever we want to call it to get more in depth. But I think that we should have those discussions on the 6th and the 13th because there's a lot there.
Yeah, and just to, you're right. It is there are pros and cons to both directions, Cindy. I see them. I think there is a route forward in both directions. And in the management plan that was put forth, in '99 is if it had the proper, in my opinion, it had the ability to be a more effective tool with a little more active management from all the participants of the respective caucuses. So I think that's something we can all get together on and figure out whether it's continues as the Richmond Ridge Management Plan or whether it continues down a different road. It'll take me a little while to think about that, but I think both ways have a viable option forward.
Mm-hmm.
And just one comment, Richmond Ridge Management Plan, it really initially was set up as a precursor to the Forest Service's update to their travel management plan. And several of the recommendations that came out of the Richmond Ridge Management Plan influenced the travel management plan that was adopted by the Forest Service in 2002, I think it was.
Yeah, that's correct.
And so it has been implemented in that sense. There are a lot of other than specific travel management recommendations. There are a lot of other portions of the management plan that were not implemented. So just to clarify, there's that piece that element of the plan is in place. It's been implemented. It's in place, and I don't think the Forest Service is going to be updating their travel management plan anytime soon. Although you never know.
Well, I'm sorry to move us on, but let's lots to think about for those meetings. But Marshall, did you have another comment real quick?
Yeah, I also wanted to add small house sizes to the discussion. I guess that would be the most important thing. And then also, I'd like to better understand the development pressures we're facing in the rural and remote part of the caucus.
Okay. And I think we can really look at a lot of that when we have those meetings on the ridge, because so much of that area is in rural and remote. So we can bring that data forward. If you could attend those meetings, Marshall, that would be awesome. Okay.
Sure.
Thanks. Okay. So small house discussion. And now, Courtney, last but not least, I'm so sorry to.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just had a little comment, and I think I already commented just under, because I'm always looking at cultural and historic resources and just not leaving out the voices that were here before. And I just had a thought on implementing maybe parking spaces in the national forest and making sure we stay historically accurate in the narrative of land. And when it comes to the concept of land in Pickens County, how it was acquired, because really nothing was deeded or ceded, and looking at title. And I don't know how to have, if that can somehow fit under cultural and historic resources. I don't know if that's too broad.
I don't think so. I think that would be a great thing to add into that section where we talk about the history, be a little bit more specific and really get into, the history of who was here before us, and then all the way through the mining era and how it sits today, not only from a habitation perspective, but from a kind of a legal perspective of mining claims and all of that. I think it would be an incredible chapter in the master plan that may end up being more of an appendix because there's so much there. But and then, Courtney, I know that you had started to think about ways to honor that past in the master plan. And one of the things that I thought was pretty innovative was that looking at ways of recognizing the Ute tribe and the other tribes that were in the area. And kind of interestingly, some places in the country that Courtney has found have established parking areas at trailheads, if you will, for that group of individuals. And so I thought, wow, if nothing else, what a great recognition to say, this is a parking space for the Ute ancestry or something like that. We discussed it, but parking is, at such a premium, but that's thinking to start to help us recognize the rich history of this area. And so we're happy, Courtney, to work with you and anyone else who might be interested in really beefing up that section of the master plan. So any other comments on that I forgot, Courtney, or anybody else?
Well, it's just also allowing those that were here before to, just have access to their sustenance and what was here. And I think it just goes along with climate change. You can't leave those voices out if we want to kind of balance things from where we are right now. So one way to get back into balance.
That whole equity piece, right?
Well, we'll look to you for some help in implementing those recommendations, help in writing the history. Sounds like you have a lot of great background to offer.
Thanks. I don't know.
And how about anyone else? Does anyone have any comments regarding the cultural section?
Nope.
Okay. And then Marshall had added in forest health and kind of looking at that a little bit more specifically. Anything else, Marshall, on that?
No, I just kind of struck me that we ought to really be, unfortunately, planning for the worst and hoping for the best, of course. But a beautiful forest right now, and they might not be so beautiful after a forest fire. And what can we do, if anything, to prepare and even prevent or make the forest healthier and come back faster after a fire?
Right. The other thing that so some other caucuses further down valley have done is also set up, kind of safety preparation plans. If in fact there is a wildfire, just knowing a little bit more in your caucus area about what to do and evacuation procedures. So,
And yeah, and we do actually have some verbiage in the draft plan to that effect already, but it could, if it needs to be improved, we'll improve it.
okay. Right. Well, what other thoughts are out there that we haven't covered tonight? We have about 8 minutes before 7. And is there anything that anybody wants to jump in on?
Sign off myself, and thanks so very much. It's so good seeing you. I finally found my mute unmute button.
Thank you. Well, thanks for being here and part of the history that we're making. Once again.
Catch up on the process. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad, for being here.
That's awesome. So what I'll summarize with really quickly then is that we are going to have a meeting with anyone who wants to be a part of it, but people who have said they will be there at 11 o'clock on the 16th from 11 to 12:30 in the Community Development Office on Main Street. And Joe, Mac, and Steve, along with me, and then Ellen will be with us virtually. So we'll have that meeting to discuss the lower portions of Castle and Maroon and just where that might go. As far as creating another planning area and potentially a caucus area. And then,
Cindy?
yes.
Excuse me, I'll also be attending that. And I think that before you start inviting other people, you have a limit, don't you, on that room?
Right. We wouldn't have anybody else in person.
Okay.
But people are always welcome to join in on Zoom. So we'll create a link where if anybody wanted to be, but we're the people that are in the room. We've established that because that's all we can do at this point. Then on the 6th and the 13th from 5:30 to 7, we'll reconvene, and those meetings will focus on the Richmond Ridge area and just see where we go with that. And we'll try to get a little more organized in terms of an agenda so we can walk through all of the major questions involved with do in that area. So, anything else anybody has? Thank you. This is great. We're starting to get into the meat of some issues. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks,
All right.
Cindy. Thanks, Ellen.
Thanks,
Night,
everybody.
night.
As always, call us or email us if you have questions or thoughts.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thanks, Bonnie.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.